Welcome back to the floor of IAE 2952. It's MISC Day here on the floor. You see all these wonderful folks in front of us. These are all people who are watching us live. Twitch.tv/TheAstroPub, YouTube.com/TheAstroPubLive. Subscribe. Hit the like button if you're enjoying this. Make sure you hit the little bell icon and come join us live. We'll be coming on for RSI Day. We'll be a little bit early. We'll be at about noon my time, so 1 p.m. Eastern. As long as you get here between noon and like 1-ish, or 1 and 2-ish Eastern, you should be able to come in. All right, with that being said, let's talk a little bit about MISC. Who are they as a manufacturer, and talk about the ships that they have here on the floor. Well, so you know, MISC is a company that was founded in Saisei in 2805. They were founded by a merger of Hato Electronics and Musashi Lifestyle brand of Acorn Limited. Acorn, the company that makes the Starheart and makes a couple of other kind of components. Well, they were founded specifically because they were wanted to build the industrial sort of brand of industrial ships to take care of the situations with the cargo crisis of the 29th century, where a lot of the companies who had been around since the Measures collapsed because they no longer had any support, because they were so closely tied to the Measures that when the Measures were overthrown, they lost their place in the economy. So MISC came in to create heavy industry. In fact, MISC used its main department is MISC Heavy Industry, which is MISC High. And from there, they developed the Hull series and the Starfarer series. And when they developed those two series of ships, they got the attention of Aopoa and the Xi'an, who approached them to offer a technology exchange. That exchange would lead to things like the Reliant, the Freelancer, the Razor, the Prospector, the Odyssey, all of these different ships which have become synonymous with MISC, and has kind of facilitated a lot of the changes that have occurred between human and Xi'an relations. MISC is still the premier heavy industry manufacturer, but they've also started to break into these smaller individual ships as well, which, as we'll see on the floor. So let's go over and talk about the oldest ship in the MISC line, and a little confusing bit of the lore, the Hull series. Let's go over here with the Hull A. So this is the Hull A. Unfortunately, we do not have the other Hull series here on the floor. We'll see the Hull C down below. But I'll go over a little bit of the Hull series in general. The Hull series was first developed in 2802. And if that sounds weird, it's because it is. The Hull series was originally developed in 2802, even though MISC wasn't developed and wasn't even formed until 2805. A bit of a weird timing, though it hasn't been explained in lore, but my guess is that the Musashi Lifestyle brand actually developed the MISC series, or the Hull series, for their own as a shipmaking, but they didn't have the ability to produce the ships themselves at the quantities they needed to. So they merged with Hato Electronics, which had an extensive amount of production facilities. We do know that Hato Electronics had an extensive amount of production facilities to be able to produce the Hull series more frequently. Now, the thing about the Hull series that makes it interesting is that every single Hull series ship is almost identical with one another. They change slightly as they increase in size, but they're built on very similar concepts with very similar techniques. The most unique is obviously the Hull A and the Hull Bs. The Hull A can actually land when it's fully loaded, but the other ones cannot. But the thing that makes it separate is if you come over here to this area here, if you see back in the back here, you see there's a little bit of a gap here. That gap, you see some kind of components on the side, or little actuators here. That whole thing, you can actually see the little pads in there, or as you can see, little stacked up little plates. That extends out when the ship's in operation to be able to lock cargo to the sides of the vessel. All of the hull ships have this. They all can lock cargo on their sides, as when we look at the holo for the whole sea, which makes it so that it's very quick change. You can expand it out to put as much cargo as you want to. You can take it to a location, unload the cargo, collapse the spindle inside of it, and then fly off wherever you want to go. So it allows it to change its size dramatically when it's not carrying cargo. That is the success of the whole series, because it is a cheap, easy way of allowing for large numbers of cargo to be delivered to a location. Because of the cargo crisis of the 29th century, this ship basically ended it. The whole series is the basis for pretty much all modern shipping. Most facilities in the verse, most stations and landing facilities are all built to deal with hull series. So the hull is the standard shipping container. The standard shipping containers even come from the size of the hull series can carry. I believe even. So the infrastructure of the UEE, the new UEE, was built around the hull series. So that's how important they are. That's why they're the most common ship to see in the verse. And the thing about even the biggest hull series is that minimum crew of even the hull D and hull E series is 1. It doesn't require many people to run these ships because they're just engines, crew compartments, and cargo skids. That's all they are. Designed to go from point to point. They don't have a lot of weapons, they don't have a lot of defenses, but they are efficient for what they do. From the hull, let's go to the next ship that they built, which was the Starfarer over here. So, this is the Starfarer. The MISC Starfarer was built in 2870, about 70 years after the introduction of the hull series, and it was built radically different from the hull. The original concept of this front area is effectively the same thing as the front of a hull E that's been chopped off and then added a completely different back to it. Now, the time period, 2870, the end of the, 2870, the end of the cargo crisis period, the end of the 29th century, the major way that liquid and fuel was transported from station to station and point to point was these massive super tankers, which were similar to the whole series, but they had welded on containers. Or they would attach these containers onto the sides of these ships and they'd go from point A to point B. That made it very dangerous because if it got into any accident, those containers might pop off and they might float away. They might burst because of micrometeorite or other things like attacks. So that was not a very effective or very well thought out method of shipment. And when you reached your destination, say you wanted to take that fuel from space to the ground, you would have to get smaller farrier tankers, which would either pick up the stuff and take it down or pipe off of the tanks and then carry them down to the surface, which was very inefficient. So MISC developed the Starfarer specifically to take advantage of this problem. Now, if we come to the back, I'll explain why. The Starfarer is a heavy, massive ship, but it is also a fairly good design for moving liquid around. These two major things are actually reactors. These are refineries. These two big kind of little corrugated sides to them, these refineries will take free hydrogen that's scooped up from the front scoop of the Starfarer and refine it into hydrogen fuel if need be. So it can refuel itself on the fly. And these pods are all welded to the superstructure, but are protected and cradled by the rest of the ship. It would require a very specific shot or a very specific... it'd be very difficult to hit these tanks directly unless you were really trying to do so, which reduced the damage and the other kind of dangers to the ship, to accidents for these tanks coming off to very, very low degrees. And on top of that, they also added this boom arm. This boom arm was built specifically to allow for the whole series, or the Starfarer, to refuel on the fly, especially smaller ships. When the Starfarer first came out, this ship was called every name under the sun. It was ugly. A lot of people didn't understand the need for it. They thought it was a joke. But shortly after, within a couple of years, Starfarers become ubiquitous. They became everywhere. They replaced a lot of those older, massive tankers for a lot of smaller versions, because the reality of space travel is very different from the belief of space travel. And this is what attracted the Xi'an, because how MISC came up with this discovery was they did their research. They went through and figured out what the major bottleneck in infrastructure was for space and discovered it was fuel transport and built the Starfarer accordingly. So this ship was ahead of its time when it was first built. And because it was so ahead of its time, it ended up doing well despite all of the negative press. And the Xi'an, who are very, very, very much forward thinkers in their culture, respected the shit out of the decision, which is what made them approach MISC as the first human company to approach to, because they felt they were in very, very similar mindsets about how you plan and think ahead rather than reacting to the market that exists. So from that, let's go over to the Gemini. All right, so here we are over with the Gemini. The thing to understand about the Gemini is that the Gemini is the military version of the Starfarer. Look at the front here. You see those are all size 5 missiles, the same size missiles, I believe, that are on the Freelancer MISC carry the same kind of missiles. Over here, you'll notice that area does not exist. That area is actually the intake that I was talking about earlier about the refinery, where you could take in stuff here and refine it. Though there are some other intakes around here that can function. That's the main one. This ship, that makes it unique, is that even though it's a MISC ship, it's not actually a MISC ship. It's actually built by Aegis Dynamics. You see, initially, when MISC approached the UEE, they knew the UEE did not have an in-flight solution to refuel their smaller ships, their fighter squadrons and such. So they approached saying, hey, we know you have this problem, we're going to solve it for you. And they were rejected, out hand. They asked for an explanation as to why their proposal was rejected, and they got silence. MISC realized that probably the reason why they got rejected was because they had literally zero history with the UEE, and they had no connections within the UEE government or the military. So as a result, they sought out a company that did have those connections and one that was struggling to try to maintain those connections, which was Aegis Dynamics. So MISC approached Aegis and said, we have a deal for you. We will produce a militarized version of our Starfarer that you will design and modify for us, and you can produce them as well, and we will share the profits in it. Aegis agreed. They put forward the proposal for the Starfarer Gemini, which is just known as the Star G to most starmen, and it became what we see here. This is a little bit different. It has all the standard features of a typical Starfarer, but it has more armor. Its top turret is slightly bigger, and it replaced the intake system with this missile system for more offensive and defensive capabilities. But other than that, it's pretty much the same. All right, from that, let's head over to the Prospector. All right, sorry about that. We had a bit of a 30K here, but we're back with the tour group. We're here to look at the result of Project Cold Start. Now, Project Cold Start was a program that MISC wanted to develop to try to increase the amount of dedicated ships, specific role ships, that they had on offer to their smaller range, the Freelancer range, which is their first real foray into smaller range industrial ships. So what Cold Start was designed to do was to effectively, what can we turn the Freelancer into? Can we build something on the same factory floors as the Freelancer for a specific role, like mining or salvage or refining or whatever? And so what they came up with, the best option based off their research, was a mining ship. because mining existed for a while with large kind of enterprise ships like the Orion. But they wanted to have, but there was a lack of like ships for somebody just starting out, or smaller companies that didn't have the money for an Orion, but may have money for multiple smaller ships. So that was what the Prospector was built as. This is a size 1 mining head. It has a pretty powerful scanner, has a crew for 1. And it has back here, these are saddlebags that can be disconnected and reattached to any number of other kind of processes, especially, most refineries. It's a pretty simple ship. It's not a Freelancer, obviously, but it is built in many of the same ways that the Freelancer was. So the idea being, if you operate a Freelancer, you should be able to operate a Prospector pretty easily. With that being said, let's actually take a look at more of the ships, the Freelancers. Let's go over here to look at the Freelancers. Alrighty, welcome to the Freelancer wing. This is probably the most iconic ship from MISC. But we have to learn a little bit about CIGs. We have to learn a little bit about MISC's deal with the AOPOA to understand why the Freelancer is so important. So, in 2910, MISC and AOPOA, the Xi'an company, sat down and crafted out a deal. The deal was that MISC would hand over its plans for things like the whole series and help give engineers and pilots to they kind of lend them to AOPOA for them to learn how to build and maintain and work human ships. And in return, MISC got Xi'an engineers and scientists and access to Xi'an engine technology to help work on their own ships. So in 2915, the process of making the Freelancer was already underway. So they incorporated a lot of Xi'an engine technology into the Freelancer itself. Originally, these back engines here would actually rotate up and down, similar to the rotation engines on, say, like a Cutlass. But that was removed because of other issues. In-game, I mean. Still, the Freelancer was highly successful. They released a long Advent campaign, which was called the Built for Life campaign. And that is what sort of kicked off the success of the Freelancer as a whole. And it was a very popular ship because it has a much longer range than most ships of its size, thanks in part to the Xi'an engine technology. It has a crew of 2 to 3, minimum 1, but you can up to 3, beds for 4, and a large 66 SCU cargo bay. And while this was designed as a cargo ship first and foremost, a lot of pilots were using it for various other things like combat and exploration. So when MISC learned about this, they decided to build their own standalone variants for each of the MISC Freelancer series. I'm trying to remember when. I think it was 2947 was when they came out. But over here is the first one of the line, which is the DUR. This is the duration variant. This is has increased scanning technology right here. This little beam right here. It has better scanners, and it has additional fuel for much longer ranges, both here in the front and on the sides of the engine. But otherwise, it's the same thing. It even has actually, let's come in here and I'll show you the cool parts, because all of the variants have their own specific additions. So they have limited fuel, limited cargo space here compared to the regular Freelancer. But in here we have a reactor. This is a fuel reactor designed to take in hydrogen and create hydrogen fuel. So this is a specific bespoke hydrogen fuel reactor, which allows to increase any range you need to. And behind you as well, as you see the some of that parts as well. So let's head out and I'll show you the next one, which is the MISC. Well, the max of the MISC, actually. One of the other variants here is the Max. The Max is just a double-wide version of a Freelancer. They had to add an additional engine to the Max to make it a little bit more powerful with the additional size. But it has, you take the front half of the Freelancer and then you slap it onto one that has a little bit bigger. That's all this is. It's just to double the cargo to, I think, 120 SCU of cargo in here. The last variant is the militia variant, also known as the MISC, M-I-S. The Freelancer MIS is it's the combat version. It's designed for more combat, but specifically it's designed as a missile boat. Because as we can see, we go in. These are two size 5 missile loaders. The top actually has a very custom-built launcher, so you can fire, I think, up to 6 on each side of these, maybe 10. But there's a significant number of additional size 5 missiles, which are pretty hefty missiles to fling at an enemy. And that is the Freelancers. From here, from the sort of inspired by the Xi'an to the downright copied to copying the Xi'an. Let's head over to the Reliant series.
Did I get a res? Somehow I got incapacitated.
All right, here we go with the Reliant. So the Reliant series is unique because unlike other ships from Freelancer from MISC, these ships specifically are designed with the Tavaran in mind. These are basically based off of Tavaran technology. They use Tavaran composite metals. They use Tavaran engine design. These are actual on-loan engine designs from the Tavaran themselves, like leased. And they actually have a rotating cabin. Well, this is the core, which is the basic version. It has 2 seats in here. It can be operated by one person, but there's also the second seat available. When this is in flight, both those seats rotate to be vertical along with the wing itself. Xi'an, I'm sorry, I said Tavaran Xi'an. We're getting to the end of IAE. I am a little tired. I'll just say that. Chat is like, Paul, you've gotten all these wrong. So it's like, no, it's fine. It's fine. So yeah, this is it's based off of the Xi'an technology. I'm going to take that again. I'm just going to go back and take it again. That whole thing again. Because what's going on? So this is the Reliant. The thing about the Reliant that's different from any other of the MISC ships of ship lines is that other ships in the MISC fleet have a inspiration or like sprinkling of Xi'an technology. This ship specifically is a Xi'an ship in all intents and purposes. It has Xi'an composite metals. It has Xi'an engines that are actually on lease to MISC. And it even has the kind of this rotating cockpit here, which is designed to rotate while in flight. So this Reliant specifically is the core. This is the one back here. I always call it the core because it's not the core. The core, people call it's the core. This is the core version, the base version of the Reliant. But then we have over here, we have the Sen. So this Sen is the science variant of it. They replaced the back cargo area for some beds and a specific kind of science array. This is a sort of allows for more research and scanning and other such additions to the to the standalone Reliant to increase its scanning range. Then here we have the Reliant Tana, which is the military version, the combat version. It has space for weapon racks. It also has little space for storage here, beds, and over here you have a pilot or a co-pilot controlled upgunned pod. I believe it's either here or over there. You have increased weapon sizes, which makes it pretty deadly in combat. And last, and certainly least, because this is the one that is probably the least valuable in game right now, we have the Mako. This is advertised as the news van variant. This has a broadcast antenna on it, or broadcast capabilities, and has a camera on it for capturing sort of events live. It was always pitched as something that content creators could use or something that could be used in game to broadcast in game, but in reality, it has very little use in practice, other than being sort of a cool prop ship, I guess. Even the camera is sort of garbage in comparison to just capturing in-game camera. But this is what it is. I would say that the Reliant series is generally the least liked versions, like starter ships, because it's technically a starter. But it's unique flavor for what it is. From this, let's head on down to the longest project that MISC has ever attempted from its concept to completion, the Razor series. All right, here we are at Project Daedalus. So, in the 2880s, I believe, the then CEO at the time of MISC wanted to move away from heavy industrial ships, which had become the main staple of MISC. They wanted to try to diversify away from the industrial line. So they created a project which would become known as the MISC Daedalus, which was a racer designed to compete in space racing endeavors. However, it didn't do so well, and while it completed the Murray Cup, it just completed. It never placed or even got a berth in the Murray Cup itself. So the project was effectively scrapped until 2910, when the first deal was struck between Aopoa and MISC about getting Xi'an engine technology. What they did from there is in 2940, they realized they still had the Daedalus prototype and could improve the Daedalus overall with Xi'an engine tech. And these areas right here, these sorts of black composites that you see here and little kind of on the side as well, these are treated with a specific metal, treated with specific chemical, some kind of Xi'an addition, which allows for greater intake on these intakes, which allows for faster collection of hydrogen, which then allows for faster regeneration of boost. This means that the Razor is very fast, combined with its Xi'an engines here, and can also just very fast. I would say it's the fastest, but no, it's not the fastest, I don't think, in the game, but it's very, very fast. And has pretty decent handling as well. So in 2947, when the MISC Razor, which became renamed, when it first was introduced into the racing scene again, and it actually got a berth in the Murray Cup, they decided to make it available for sale as well. And along the way, they also produced two different variants. This is the EX, or the LX. The LX is people say it's a luxury version, but I like to call it the drag racing version. This sacrifices much of the maneuverability for straight line speed. This is the fastest version of the Razor, but it is not very maneuverable. Then over here, we've got the EX, which is the stealth version. Now, this ship was actually purchased and operated by the Advocacy. So the Advocacy uses these for very clandestine missions and retrievals. They use their own versions of the EX to help them out. But it has both its armor and its paint are in components. Sorry, both its armor and its components are all stealth based, so it makes it a little bit more stealthy when it comes into, while still keeping the speed of a typical Razor. From all of the ships that are available on the floor, let's look at the future, which is a lot. Come with me. All right. So we already talked about the whole series, but this is the whole C. But most of the ships are above a whole A are effectively whole C or bigger. They're the same thing, only with more spindles. Maybe some slight increase in the cabin, but not by much. So the whole C, as you can see, each of those boxes, I believe, are 32 SCU boxes. So they can hold a lot of cargo. And you can start to see why this ship was used, is credited for effectively ending the cargo crisis. Because you don't need many other ships other than a few whole seas to be carrying pretty much anything in the verse where you need it to go. So that's the whole sea. We already talked a little bit extensively about the whole series, though. So let's go from the whole sea over here to the next one, which is the Odyssey. So the Odyssey has an interesting legacy. The Odyssey was built for 2 reasons and 2 reasons only. Number 1, because the Carrack was popular, both in-game and in real life. Because of the popularity of the Carrack, MISC wanted to get in on that exploration, so they built the Odyssey. The other reason is because of the botched release of the Endeavor, which we'll talk about here in a moment. It was so botched that they wanted to have something that was an honest-to-God exploration ship that was pitched properly and built properly. So that's what the Odyssey is all about. It is a large ship. It has a small hangar, I believe, and not an extra small, a small bay for a hangar. It has cargo. It has extensive range to it. And its unique gimmick is underneath the cockpit here is actually a mining. You can take like a front of a prospector and stick that thing on there. It has a mining laser and a onboard refinery to allow it to mine and refine its own quantum fuel. So that increases its range significantly and its ability to work as a exploration ship. The way that MISC pitched this is not only can you chart the stars, but you can already exploit the resources of those stars at the same time. From the Odyssey, let's head on over to, I believe, the Expanse. So the Expanse is, again, part of that long MISC heritage of taking lots and lots of data and turning it into something valuable. The Expanse was built after feedback from the Prospector. A lot of people enjoyed the Prospector, but the major issues that people had with the Prospector was that they had to go to third-party refineries to get a lot of their stuff refined because they didn't have their own onboard refinery. And as a result, they tended to not make enough money to afford multi-crew, better multi-crew miners like the Mole or the Orion. So they came up with the Expanse. The Expanse is a refinery ship. Its sole job is it has 6 built-in refineries that can refine anything from any kind of minerals and even scrap and salvage to their own components and such. It is built like any other MISC ship, but the main way that you interact with things, it has nothing to do in typical MISC fashion. It's a lot of handheld. You got to move things around. But with the Expanse, everything is done by tractor beams. So they have a tractor beam array which allows you to kind of load and unload the saddlebags to load and unload multiple different commodities, as need be. And the idea is that it's able to be soloable, or 1 or 2, very few crew members, and you can just add it to any small fleet of prospectors, and you're good to go. Probably cheaper to buy and operate with a prospector and a MISC or a Expanse than it is to try to buy, say, an Orion. All right, with that, let's move on to the last one, the Endeavor. Now, the Endeavor got a bit of a tragic backstory. The Endeavor is actually the 3rd ship that MISC ever built. They wanted to build a science and medical ship. So they brought teams from the whole team, so the people who built the whole series and the people who built the Starfarer series together and said, you 2 work together to make this ship. The problem is that the approach to the design of the hull versus the approach to the design of the Starfarer are very different. So they came at it from 2 different complete mindsets and how it worked. As a result, they could not agree on anything but the bare basics and decided that they would sell modules instead of actually selling a ship. So you'd have to purchase prefab modules or kind of swap them out on your own in order to make the ship you want. That worked for most people, but as a result, you didn't really have a science research and medical ship. You had a science ship, a research ship, and a medical ship separate from one another because they couldn't really be operated together. So the Endeavor has 3 sections, which is called the Exploration Cab, which is this front section, which can actually disconnect entirely and go on its own. You have the Workshop, which is this middle section here, which is where you can attach modules and kind of do other things. And then the very back section here, which is called the Drive section, which has the Quantum Drive, the Jump Drive, and all of the engines. And on the sides, you can see these little kind of rectangular shaped things. Those are where you attach the various modules to turn it into various things. There are biodomes, there are crew habitation centers, there are hospital sections, there are landing bay sections, there are general science, there's specific science, like there's a telescope, there's a particle collider, lots of different sorts of additions you can make to this. With that being said, that is the floor here of IAE 2952 for MISC Day. Thank you for joining us. I want to thank all these folks who are going to come out here with me for joining us live. If you want to join us live, we have one more day left, which is going to be on Saturday, November 26th. It's probably already out. This video is probably already out in that morning before then. So at 1 p.m. Eastern, between 1 and 2 p.m. Eastern is when we will go live. With this last thing, we'll be looking at probably the latest edition, which is the Galaxy. Learn a little bit about that, as well as all of the other RSI ships from the oldest manufacturer. But I want to know what your thoughts are on the MISC ships down below in the comments. Thank you to these wonderful folks here who've been hanging out with us. And like I say every time, hope to see you someday in the black.